The ruckus was made by a kid named Ghoul, and his yelling continued to gather around countless students on the spot, which then gets broken off by their training master Ungum, as he advised Chung Myung to get some rest for the day when he finishes introducing himself. Before running off to his own room, Ghoul ends up threatening to teach him a lesson tomorrow, which he decides to pay deep attention to. The next day, Ghoul decides to use his seniority in a bad way to punish and bully Chung Myung, but ends up getting a pure beating therapy given by Chung Myung himself. All of the students that were present in the scene continued to bow down to Chung Myung after getting beaten by him, while Yoon Jong kept putting his efforts into massaging him with a bruised face. He learns from Ghoul that the remaining forces of the Demon Sect marched to Mount Hua and set the whole mountain on fire, giving the sect unrecoverable damage. When Chung Myung was having a great time thinking about his past life, he gets called out by the boarding house advisor Ungum to participate in the training. But Chung Myung gets annoyed by the fact that all of the students were getting taught sword fighting in the stupidest way possible, which could hinder the children from getting stronger. Chung Myung took the matter into his hands, knowing that only the proper fundamentals could bring them prosperity, and asked what else they learn in the training. He learns that the soul technique he removed in his past life was being used as a graduation test, and grows heavily disappointed in the current state of the sect. That night, he called Ghoul to ask him for a favor to gather everyone in front of the boarding house at 5 a.m. the next morning, where he had to teach the rebel juniors a great lesson for speaking against his ideology. He then announces that they will continue to train together every early morning, and when the training master finally wakes up from his sleep, he finds every student, including Joe Ghoul, in the training ground in bad condition due to Chung Myung's hardcore training, while Chung Myung was continuing his wild training. Witnessing the unnerving state of the newcomer while Chung Myung's legs continued to shake in the training, Ungum gives him time to quench his thirst as he continued to ask him about the eventful incident. Chung Myung considered it a little morning exercise, and the student's scared state after seeing Chung Myung's face suggested Ungum otherwise. The uncanny state of the students got Chung Myung scolded by the training master, but he ends up stopping to pry into the matter, looking at the innocent face of Chung Myung as he promises to bring great results within 1 month. The meticulous state of Chung Myung's mental strength felt like the real deal to Un-am, and he continued to support the decision made by Chung Myung as he announced the continuation of the training. Days kept on passing, and Chung Myung got accustomed to the daily deeds in Mount Hua Sect while training his eternal energy. He didn't stop analyzing facts about the sect and found out some crucial information about it in the process. He was able to find out the weakness in the current roots, but he believed that reaching the dream to become the strongest sect wasn't impossible. Meanwhile, some of the juniors kept complaining to Joe Ghoul about Chung Myung while having dinner one day, and he leaves the premise instantly to have a conversation with Yoon Jong. Both of them seemed quite optimistic about Chung Myung taking the matter into his own hands, which might lead their sect into something great one day. Also, Joe Ghoul wanted to try his best to become a great master, to be able to lead the entire world under Chung Myung's training, and Yoon Jong shared the same thought. Meanwhile, Chung Myung was quite satisfied listening to both of them while taking a rest on the tree branch. Suddenly, the yelling and screaming made by unknown entities knocking on the door startled Chung Myung, as Un-am and Ungam both failed to forbid them from meeting the sect leader to talk about the matter of debt collection. Later, it was revealed that the whole Mount Hua Sect was indebted to the pavilion owner Kong and the merchant union when the tragedy fell upon them. The date they all previously agreed on has already passed, so the merchants decided to give them only 7 days to pay back the debt. The time in the sect leader's hand was only growing less and less, as the merchants threatened to confiscate the temple of Mount Hua Sect. Chung Myung hiccups in shock after witnessing the whole confrontation, which gets noticed by everyone present in the scene. Chung Myung continues to gather information via his juniors as they had the current experience of living outside of Mount Hua Sect. He got irritated by the fact that the Tai Hua Pavilion, which once was the possession of Mount Hua Sect, is now threatening to confiscate the sect temple. He couldn't wrap his head around how Tai Hua Pavilion was able to lend the sect money while being in the possession of Mount Hua Sect in the first place. Chung Myung disguises himself in black traditional clothing to hide from the publicity, as he gets ready to investigate the matter himself. On the other hand, Kong was partying with his fellow companions, thinking that they will soon win over the situation, and he was planning to use the enemies of the Mount Hua Sect to their advantage from day one. Kong believed that the enemies of Mount Hua Sect are willing to spend a fortune to erase its existence. When the party ended, Chung Myung meets a drunk merchant who was a part of Kong's commission, and the instant Chung Myung demanded information about the meeting, a bunch of his high-class bodyguards popped in front of him from the shadows. Chung Myung ends the fight in a short amount of time and proceeds to interrogate the merchant with a little violence on the side. The interrogation was successful as the merchant started to spill the truth continuously, but Chung Myung couldn't understand how the debt was piling up as the merchant had mentioned. The merchant then introduced the interest rate to him proudly, which was placed on their loans. Also, all of the businesses in the prefecture used to belong to Mount Hua Sect, but when the sect was on the verge of collapsing, the representatives took advantage and named it theirs. Suddenly, one of the bodyguards with the name of Young Bin rushes to Chung Myung and attacks him, but with the vast experience compared to the escort, he successfully overpowers the man and gets knocked out once again. Chung Myung was misunderstood as a Southern Edge sect member by the merchant, which then helped him to gather information more easily than before. Jo Gul and Jong Yoon were waiting for Chung Myung in the hallway of the boarding house to hear whatever happened to him outside, but Chung Myung only focused on announcing that they will start the training as soon as possible. The sheer determination of Chung Myung boosts the morale of Jo Gul, while he rests easy thinking about what he could do to protect his beloved sect from the evil grasp. He knew that all he needed was the evidence to prove that the businesses were originally owned by the Mount Hua Sect to save their neck and also their reputation. After thinking for a while, he manages to point out the location where his senior Jang Moon might have hidden it for the safety of their original accounts. To find out the secret storage that must have been hidden inside the hills behind the sect leader's residence, Chung Myung gets ready to do the exciting treasure hunting for the sake of his beloved clan's future. However, searching an entire mountain is no easy task, so he uses his internal energy to meet the large empty space that leads to the storage room. But he couldn't reach anything on his first try as he kept lying on the ground, losing hope. But then, after trying for the last time, he ends up reaching the empty space that could lead him to the first success on behalf of the Mount Hua Sect. When the tiresome digging for hours ended, he was able to reach a brick wall, and under the brick wall, there was a hallway leading to the secret storage. Suddenly, he notices the sect leader walking into the secret passage, but he wasn't trying to do anything other than endure his pain and sadness alone in a place like that. Chung Myung felt like he must be the one to be blamed for the current state of the sect, and when he touched the huge door of the passage to unlock it with his internal power, 1-foot-thick everlasting metal bounced the energy off, which explained why the sect leader seemed distressed. After looking at the door for a while, he felt like the pattern made by blade marks on the wall represented the 24-movement Plum Blossom Sword and some other fundamental techniques. In order to open the door, Chung Myung will have to follow the marks, as he will start with the easiest, and then finish it off with the hardest training in the book. Even though it would have been really easy for his past self, but the body that he currently carries is of a child, which made him quite vulnerable. He only had a way of dealing with it, and it was through using his innate true QI to manage to do the sword dance, like the true Plum Blossom Sword Saint. As Chung Myung continued to gurgle blood through his mouth, he hoped for the huge door to open as it did. Chung Myung knew that he would have to get bedridden for 1 or 2 months to save his Mount Hua Sect, but he continued to smile as he reached the inside of the door. The secret passage only carried 3 bookshelves, containing which included copies of the original account books from the Finance and Economy Agency. When Chung Myung finished gathering the old accounts in his chest pocket, he found books that contained secret techniques that had been abandoned by the Mount Hua Sect. Chung Myung realized, even though Jang Mun tried to do his best to get adjusted to the current followings, he couldn't rest easy abandoning the past techniques, feeling as if they might have a negative impact on the future, so he stored them in books. Lastly, Chung Myung reached for a scroll that was left on the 3rd bookshelf, which carried a message written by the previous sect leader, Chung Mun, to the future sect leader. Before leaving the room, He felt like the storage room was looking rather uncanny for someone like Chung Myung, who had terrible OCD that gave him the habit of keeping 2 lamps in his room directly. His suspicion reached him in an underground bunker-like place, where the previous sect leader stored the piles of gold bars, along with all the precious swords that were organized in perfect order. Not only that, but also many unknown gems and secret technique books existed in the same place for the future of his great sect. The next morning, when the current sect leader was resenting his life after waking up, he gets called by his aide Ungum, who was too nervous to state what he witnessed. As they continued to travel through the forest, they witnessed tired and burnt-out students lying down on the ground, while Chung Myung claimed that he had found the treasure of the Mount Hua Sect in his weakened state. The overexcited sect leader only cared about the lost techniques of the Mount Hua Sect, as he fell on the ground unconsciously by taking a glance at the books. When he finally woke up, he called Hyun Young, who then confirmed the truth of the written documents that could save the Mount Hua Sect from getting sold to some unknown entity. The sect leader thought of Chung Myung as the harbinger of fortune in the Mount Hua Sect, while he got ready to confront the merchants about the truth. A few days later, when the merchants were called in, they only cared about capital and interest, while they kept on climbing up the mountain. The Taihua pavilion owner Kong felt like the sect leader wanted to beg them for mercy and to quicken the process, as he didn't want to drag it out until the promised date. The beaten-up merchant didn't believe that the incident was going to go in their way, but he only cared about receiving 5,000 nyangs like he was promised. When the bunch of merchants finally reached the main gate, they were greeted by Un-am, who then took them to the sect leader Hyun Jong. The lowly merchants rejected the offer of tea proposed by the sect leader himself, as Kong was desperate to get his hands on the Mount Hua Sect's temple. Hyun Jong stated that even though they won't be able to repay the debt fully, he was eager to repay it partially while he pleaded to them wholeheartedly. While Chung Myung continued to wonder what Hyun Jong is actually like, pavilion owner Kong ends up rejecting the proposition while laughing at him. Eventually, the beaten-up merchant quickly agreed to Hyun Jong's statement when he brought up the name of Mount Hua Sect and its history. He felt like the name and history of the Mount Hua Sect were far more precious than any kind of treasure that can be achieved by money. The merchants that cared about the Mount Hua Sect's history continued to grow, while Kong and a small number of his members stood on the other side alone. When the business account books of the Hua Prefecture finally got brought there by Un-am at the request of his sect leader, the whole environment changes as Hyun Jong continues to state the facts that were written on the books.